Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Sheriff's Mic, clear to talk with me, your sheriff, Corey Honea. Today, I have David Little, who is the former editor of our local newspaper. David, welcome. Thank you for agreeing to be on my podcast. So what decided in terms of your life to get you into journalism?
I realized I was never going to be a professional athlete. I'd get paid to do it. So the next best thing was to get paid to cover it for a newspaper. So at 16, when I got my driver's license, I went down to the local newspaper and said, hey, can you put me to work writing sports? I'll do it for free, which was terribly against the law, but I did it, and they did it. And so I started as a sports journalist when I was a sophomore in high school. And by the time I was a junior, I was covering like Padres games and Chargers games. This is down in Oceanside, northern San Diego County. And San Diego Clippers, they were there at the time, and just like that whet my appetite for journalism. Just loved it. Loved the daily grind, loved the pressure, loved the deadlines. And it wasn't until I was in my 30s where I got into the news side of things. And really loved that too. I was surprised, like, why did I stay in sports for so long? There's this whole other world of journalism out there, and stayed with that until I left the newspaper at 58, I think I was.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the entire career in print media, right? Newspaper.
Entire career in print. Yeah.
I'll tell you, I still subscribe to the newspaper, still read it every single day. You and I have had some conversations in the past about how especially local newspapers are so important and so integral to a community. And unfortunately, it is harder and harder for local newspapers to stay afloat, to be out there, right?
Yeah, it really is. The Enterprise-Record was family owned until 1983, and as most newspapers were across the country. And the owners looked at it as a community asset. They weren't trying to get rich. They were just trying to inform the community. Now it's not that way. That's one of the things that drove me away from the business was we were owned by a hedge fund. A lot of newspapers are owned by hedge funds or corporations, and to them it's just a way to make money. And the public service part of journalism really becomes more difficult when you're just concerned about making money.
Yeah. And, the other thing is that the way in which media in general and newspapers in particular make their money has changed dramatically, right? It used to be advertising dollars was the primary driving factor. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. Advertising dollars and subscriptions, it was 50-50. But that was in a day when, when I started in the business, 80% of the people took a home-delivered newspaper. That means 8 out of the 10 homes on your block would get that paper thrown every morning out there at 4 a.m. Now, I live on a street with 16 people, 16 homes. I think 2 of us get it.
Really?
And I'm one of them.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, it's really changed. And therefore the influence of the newspaper has changed. The importance of a newspaper has changed.
You mentioned how the newspaper was family-owned for many, many years, and there was a community service aspect to the newspaper and putting the newspaper out every day. It wasn't completely profit-driven. And that's one of the things that I think is concerning about newspapers going in the direction they are. But for that matter, all local media. And as sheriff, I certainly have an opportunity to interact with our local media on a pretty regular basis. And that's where I've found a common goal between the sheriff's office or public safety and our efforts to inform the community about the things that are going on, and the commitment of local media. It's not the same for national media, and I've had my experience with them as well, right?
Sure.
But people might wonder, well, how does your local media really play a role in public safety? And what I've learned, and I think you and I both have experienced this, is that there's this element where there are times when it's really important that we get accurate information out to the community about public safety threats or concerns or, criminal activity, that kind of thing. And what I've found is that by having a good working relationship with your local media, it facilitates that much more readily than if you have an adversarial role. What's your thought on that?
Well, it's a delicate balance. I mean, you have to be able to ask tough questions. You have to be able to pry and prod. But at the same time, if you cover a sheriff's office or a police department during good times and all the great stories that are going on there, it makes it easier to ask the tough questions if that time arises. And there's definitely a symbiotic relationship. There always has been. I mean, newspapers and TV cannot survive without a good relationship. And I've seen bad relationships, not only in my experience, but in other experiences that I've heard about from colleagues, former colleagues. It can get really ugly, and that doesn't serve anybody, including either side. It makes it really difficult for a public safety agency to do its job if the newspaper is not helpful, and vice versa.
Yeah, you're right. And you touched on two things I think are important that I want to highlight. And one is covering both the positive things as well as the potentially negative things. And I agree wholeheartedly with you. It's important for us to have media within a community that delves into all the things that are going on with the government. There is an important check and balance that brings to the table. Unfortunately, as local media is struggling, that aspect of that check and balance is becoming harder and harder to support, right?
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, when I started as editor of the Enterprise-Record, it was 1999. We had 45 people in our newsroom. Now the Enterprise-Record has 6 people in their newsroom. What a difference. And there was like one person who covered just the sheriff's department, and one person who covered just the Chico Police Department, and one person who covered City Hall. And they knew as much about county government or local government than a lot of the people who worked in the government, because they'd been doing it forever. We had a reporter named Nick Elena who covered the county, and he covered the county for like 40 years.
Wow!
And what a tremendous resource he was. He knew everything. He knew where all the bones were buried. As the newspapers and TV stations get smaller and there's more turnover, it becomes harder and harder. You probably in your position have to educate reporters because they're so new more than the other way around. That doesn't happen the other way around anymore because there's just not as much longevity. And that's, when I talked about how corporate owners are kind of ruining local journalism, I should say that the journalists that are here do a really good job of ignoring who their owners are. Like when I was the editor here, I never once had an owner tell me, you have to write this, you have to write that, you have to cover this or that. Instead, their ownership is concerned about one thing, and that's the bottom line. So their involvement with the head of the newspaper was more, you have to cut a person, you have to cut a person, you have to cut a person. Not what we would cover, how we would cover it. That was still purview of the local newsroom. And so all the local journalists who are still here are doing a great job against really difficult odds. The problem is there's fewer of them, and I feel sorry for them because they're trying to make the best of a really tough situation.
Yeah, you're right. So it's funny because National Night Out was earlier this week, and I was interviewed by a reporter from the newspaper who was brand new, first time, just met her. It was a great interview, and she actually used a word. She asked me how I liked interacting with people in a chillax environment, and jokingly I said to her, "I'll only answer that question if in the article you actually use the word chillax." So I read the newspaper today. Great coverage of law enforcement, public safety during positive times, which you talked about. You got to cover both sides of it. And she did it. She used the word chillax, and it made me laugh. And I sent a text message to Mike Wolcott today and told him that I appreciated the fact that she was willing to entertain that request.
I love that, and the spell checker had to flag it like every step of the way.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and I'm sure she got asked by the copy editor and the person, pushing the button at the end saying, "Produce this page." Like, "Do you sure you want to use chillax?"
Oh, good for her though. I appreciate. She was a great sport about it, and the article was great. Great coverage about National Night Out and public safety. In addition to that, though, there's the local television station was there, and brand new reporter, second day. And you're right about the fact that I often find myself in a position where I do have more experience dealing with the media and news stories than the people who are sometimes interviewing me. And we have our community relations coordinator Megan McMahon. She's got a lot of experience in the media. She and I often will help them set up their shots and make sure they're good, and ask those questions. But I actually don't mind it because it's a good opportunity to help people as they begin their career and moving on, that kind of thing. But we do see a lot of turnover, and in some respects, it's fun to see people begin their career. But you're right; they lack a lot of institutional knowledge, and in the grand scheme of things, that can be challenging.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. I think one good example of my current job is a reporter came to me and wanted to do a story based on something they saw on Facebook, a reaction on Facebook, which was very much not valid. And to talking to the reporter off the record, which is a good way to do things, and just say, here's why that person's comment isn't valid. The worst thing in the world to do, though, is just to tell the reporter that's not a story. You shouldn't write that, because then, of course, they're going to write it.
Sure.
Nobody tells reporters what to write, get their hackles up. Yeah. But instead, trying to explain to them in an off-the-record fashion, like, no, here's the history behind that comment, just so you know. And then she decided not to do the story, which was the right decision. And I imagine you probably run into that, too.
We do. It's funny you mentioned that, too, because I think the other social media has a two-edged sword, right? I mean, there's a lot of it's a great way to allow people to communicate and get information out there, but it is replete with false information. And as a falsehood can make its way around the world right before the truth puts its shoes on, I think is this, as the saying goes. But yeah, we are constantly having to contend with rumors or inaccurate information that is going out on social media pages. And, that's the one thing that you kind of miss when you're dealing with, traditional journalists who have standards. They've got to actually dig in, find facts, corroborate, hopefully provide a balanced approach to the whole thing. And there are days when I certainly miss having that as the primary source of information for people, as opposed to social media where they get it now.
That's the hardest part about the shrinking of media, is that so many people do get their information on Facebook. So many people do think information should be free, and there's no place in our world for professional journalists, according to these people.
Yeah.
Like, they're not going to pay for a product like the Enterprise-Record, and thank goodness TV is free, or they wouldn't even look at that. And that becomes dangerous when people. The fewer watchdogs we have looking at everything in our world, the worse off we are. And that's what worries me more than anything about the loss of journalists is, things are happening that aren't getting covered. It's not good for democracy.
It is not. And it's, especially when it intersects with public safety related issues, because when you don't have professional journalists doing investigative reporting under the standards that journalists should be operating under, then you, miss out on identifying things that need to be brought to people's attention and having an accurate story. And in the public safety realm, same way. When we're trying to get information out about, evacuations or, looking for criminal suspects and things like that, you want to have somebody who has some standards so that that information is going to be conveyed correctly. We spend a lot of time trying to correct information or deal with rumor and innuendo that we could be spending actually doing the things that we need to do.
And the bigger the story, the worse it gets. Like, I remember during the Oroville spillway fiasco, the falsehoods that were running around on social media were so alarming. And you could spend, and your staff could spend an entire day correcting people online. But it's like it's a whack-a-mole. It would pop up somewhere else, and it gets really difficult because you want to be everywhere. You have to be everywhere this day and age. You can't just go to the newspaper and TV and say evacuate. You have to go to the newspaper and TV and social media and all of your back channels to make sure people get the word out. People don't go to one place for information anymore. They go everywhere, and so you have to be everywhere, and that's got to be difficult from your standpoint. It's like, how do you get the word out to everybody? And it's like, there's only one way, and that's be everywhere.
Yeah, it is, and it's tough. And even when you're trying to be everywhere, there's no guarantee that you're going to reach everybody, right? And we've seen that play out a lot of times. Even more recently, we saw with all of the fires we've dealt with, and even more recently down in LA, same kind of things that we dealt with, they had to deal with too. You talk about the symbiotic relationship, and I just want to touch on that before we move on to some other aspects of this conversation. It's not uncommon, I think. I hear law enforcement leaders lament their maybe poor relationship they have with their local media, or kind of view the media as a nuisance. What's interesting about that is the first time that we need to get information out about a missing person or a criminal investigation looking for tips, and we're going to talk about our interaction with the campfire and things like that. The media, the law enforcement runs right out there, but then they treat it as a nuisance when they have to put out press releases about the day-to-day stuff. But that's the bread and butter. That's the things that you ultimately look for to build your stories off of, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah, and you don't even need a press release even. You just need a call back from somebody in power to answer the questions. And it's interesting. Some departments just want one person speaking for the department. I'm not talking about your department, but like a police agency or even a city hall. Yeah. They just want one person talking when in fact there's somebody else at that department who can answer the question better than the spokesperson. And it's a shame. I think part of that is paranoia about how they will be treated in the media, where they got to have a communications professional answer questions, when in fact the city engineer could do a better job of answering why the street's being torn up instead of their communications director, which is bad for me to say because I was hired as a communications director at the Community Foundation. But you don't need me, you need the person who has the answers. Well,
and maybe the person who has the answers could get a little bit of coaching and guidance from the media expert, and then provide the information you need, right? I mean, that's a good way to do it too.
Well, sure, yeah. But I think what it comes down to is two people and relationships, and I'm sure we're going to talk about this. But the reason you're so successful in dealing with the media is that you're a real honest person. And I've been around people who aren't.
Yeah.
It comes down to two people who get along and respect each other and respect the work each other does, and that's what's valuable. And that's what makes for a better working relationship.
Agreed. So I think I'd like to start with this in terms of some of our collaboration, and I certainly were aware of who you were prior to me becoming the sheriff, but it was after I became the sheriff that I think we had more opportunities to work collaboratively together, or interact. It would be maybe a better way to articulate that. But I think where our respect for one another and that working relationship, the foundation of that working relationship, probably began on the border of Arizona and Mexico. Would you agree?
1 month before the campfire.
Month before the campfire, which was fortuitous because having gone through that experience, which we'll talk about in a minute, I think allowed us to immediately be able to trust one another when the campfire came, right?
See, but my trust predated that. Was when the Oroville spillway.
Okay.
The year before that.
Okay.
That was where I really got to know you personally and professionally, because of the intense pressure you were under and the media scrutiny, and all the national media were here to cover that big story, and you handled it so well. And that was when I got to know you in a pressure-packed situation, and liked you even more because of the way you performed during that. So that made, when I got your kind invitation to go to Arizona with you, easy to say, I'd like to spend 3 or 4 days with that guy.
That's cool. I love that. And I'm glad you brought that up because, the spillway incident was another. That was the first major incident that I dealt with as sheriff, and honestly thought that'd be the last major incident that I ever dealt with, right? But I did learn a lot from that. And I think one of the lessons that I learned was, one, deal with or talk with your local media first, because all of those other major networks, they're going to be gone the moment that something sexier or more important in their eyes is there, right? And so that's kind of where I developed the whole I'm going to give interviews to my local reporters first, and then CNN and Fox and ABC News and all those, they can wait over there. And that has paid off, because actually the relationships that I was able to deal with. That was also, I think, the first time I recall the governor showed up and didn't tell anybody that he was coming. And I got a call from a local media that said, "Hey, was the governor here?" And I said, "Why, yes, he was." And I don't think they liked that, but it didn't matter. It was important to do that. So we get that incident, and then I get this wild idea to invite you to the border, to tour the border and look at what was going on there with regard to immigration, illegal immigration, drugs coming across the border, how the cartels were controlling all that kind of thing. What's crazy is that was in 2018. We were starting to see the impacts of that, and now that is such a relevant story today, given all the things that are going on, right?
Oh yeah, and it even predated the invitation. The reason we did this story and the reason you were down there was because these cartel grows up in the national forests, especially up in the foothills of Butte County, were going on all the time, and were really a public safety hazard for anybody like me who likes to go out and hike or hunt out in the wilderness.
Yep.
And to run across an illegal grow is scary.
Yeah.
And the sheriff's office was taking care of those as well as they could, but what a huge problem. And so to see where the problem originated, which is things coming across or going the other way across the border, that was a really interesting story. It wasn't just a border story. It was
absolutely not
the whole country.
Well, and a lot of that, to give credit where it's due, I received a copy of a book called Our 50-State Border Crisis, written by a guy named Howard Buffett, and read the book and was intrigued by the book, but also that connected dots for me, because you're right. Here in California, especially in Butte County, we had been dealing with these cartel-controlled marijuana operations for years, to the point where there were times during the year where my detectives would call it marijuana murder season, because we would deal with murder investigations, connected to these cartel grows. And that, coupled with the fact that, Butte County has a very high rate of opioid addiction and opioid overdoses and deaths and things like that. So it's definitely public safety. And, those drugs are coming from Mexico across. Methamphetamine and heroin and fentanyl are all being trafficked across the border, but they're having these detrimental impacts in our community. They're killing people in our community, right?
Yeah. And it was interesting to see that firsthand, how they get things across the border. I was fascinated to hear all the stories down there. It was mind-boggling for me. Yeah, very interesting. And Howard Buffett's book, he does a great job of explaining it in really good detail. It's a well-researched book. I'm surprised. Everybody I ever talked to about the border situation says you should start with this nonfiction book.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
He did a good job.
Yeah. That's a whole, maybe a topic for another episode, but just the relationship that, I was able to cultivate with him and more. He just sent me another book, photo book of photographs taken in Ukraine. He's been to Ukraine numerous times since the war, documenting what's going on there. So that's a whole another aspect of what he does.
I'd love to see that.
I will share that with you.
Yeah.
It is a cool book. It is a very cool book. The other, the Cochise County Sheriff, Mark Daniels, was instrumental in accommodating our visit. And we got to go down there, and they took us out, right?
Oh yeah, we drove the border almost all the way into New Mexico.
Yeah,
it was very interesting to be with these trained officers. We're in the back seat, they're in the front seat, and you'd be driving down a gravel road where it didn't look like any living thing had been there, including animals, forever. And he would stop, back up the truck, and say, somebody walked through there today. You could tell by looking at these tracks. and people didn't leave like foot tracks because they wore these kind of booties over
Right.
their shoes
with a carpet
yeah
fashion over. Yeah,
So
exactly.
they wouldn't leave a footprint, but the trained officer, the trained deputy could tell
Yeah.
and those guys were pretty smart.
They were. Yeah. Very, very
by
in
them.
tune with what was going on down there. Yeah. And of course, seeing how, they bring stuff through tunnels and diversion tactics. And even I think we were down there, they pointed out how cartel operatives were across the border monitoring what we were doing, keeping an eye on those kinds of things.
Yeah, we're sitting on a hill and they're pointing up at a hill, and that's where they watch us with binoculars.
Yeah.
I mean, nothing gets by them.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was before, it seemed to really explode. And then, of course, now it's still in the news, right? The border and immigration and all of the things that are going on.
And it's different products, you
Yeah.
know. And the whole one product at the time was people, and they
Yes.
were trafficking in people and bringing them across, and the people were helping bring their product across. But it's a different product. It went from marijuana to fentanyl to what now? I don't know.
Yeah, and the human trafficking aspect is still, a big part of that whole thing. It's clearly an issue that I think people, regrettably, like a lot of the things that we're dealing with today, become overly politicized. People start to view it through that political lens as opposed to looking at the impact that it really has on public safety. But that was definitely a memorable trip, and I really do appreciate the fact that you were willing to take that adventure with me.
Yeah, what a story.
Yeah.
What a story. I came back from that wanting to write a book.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I should.
Yeah.
I should.
Well,
I still should.
It's not too late. It's not too late. Yeah. And we had talked about it, getting back and doing a story almost immediately, but
Something came up.
something came up. Yeah. A couple weeks later.
Yeah, it was just a couple weeks.
Yeah.
I think we got back on like October 15th, and the fire was November 8th.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. And campfire starts, and that upended the world for everybody here. Right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was a 2-month sprint. I don't remember getting up for air until early January.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I know you were working every day. I think I ended up I worked 40 days straight, and my staff doing the same thing, and I think we were all there. And all the things we're doing, but of course the intersection was the daily press briefings, right? Every single day, right?
Right.
Yeah. The grind that was, and those were tough because it was nothing but doom and gloom, right?
Yeah, I mean that it was tough for you, but for us, it went so far beyond the daily press briefings. I mean, the fact that I had an open line of communication to you and could get answers, and I didn't have to wait till the 5 p.m. press briefing to do it. I was so thankful for that.
Oh, absolutely.
And that was because of our relationship.
Yeah.
But there were so many examples of that. Let me just give you one.
Okay.
Carl Mondin, who was a reporter, photographer for the San Jose Mercury News. At the time, we didn't have any photographers at the Enterprise-Record. We had one photographer, and he was out on medical leave when the fire hit. So the Mercury News, which was one of our sister papers, sent up five people that help our newsroom out. And one of them was Carl, who's a great photographer. Well, we get an anonymous tip. One of our reporters gets an anonymous tip about where the campfire started up there,
Okay.
and the broken hook and everything else. So Carl wanted to get up Highway 70, and this was like within a week of the fire. Get up Highway 70 and get a picture of where the fire started. Couldn't get through the roadblocks. I texted you and said, our photographer is stuck at Jarbo Gap. Can you get him in? And minutes later, I get a text from Carl, who thinks I'm a miracle worker, saying, I'm in. I'm going to get the photo. So yeah, it wasn't just the daily press briefings. That was your poor struggle that you had to deal with every day. But just the fact that we could talk when we had an emergency or had a question.
What was important?
It was.
It was important. I mean, that time there was so much anxiety within the community, rightfully so. I mean, everybody was being traumatized by that. And one of the things that I found was trying to communicate with people and provide them with as much information, even if it was bad news, was so important. And to this day, I have people come up to me and go, "Hey, you were the person that we listened to during that whole thing." But I couldn't have done that with without the support of in particular, our local media. I mean, granted, there were the national media there as well, but really helping get that story out.
Well, I remember what you told me at the time was the worst part about those briefings was announcing people's identities
Yep.
every evening.
Yep.
Another 5, another 10. And I remember you telling me, like, this is horrible news to deliver every day, and if someone's going to do it, I want to be the one doing it.
Yeah.
And that's what I think people appreciated, was just like everybody felt like they knew you.
Yeah.
And somebody to turn to. You need somebody to turn to in a difficult situation like that. And that was going back to the spillway. That was a problem with the spillway until you took charge and made decisions when nobody else was making decisions. It was a bad situation. But once you have a leader step up and show that leadership and say, if there's bad news to deliver, I'm going to deliver it. That's what happened again a year later with the fire.
Yep. Yeah. So the other aspect of that, certainly advising people about the deaths, that was a tough part of it. But the other aspect of that was the missing or unaccounted for people. And I'll tell you, one of the things I learned was there were so many people that were unaccounted for in the early days of the campfires, as you recall, right? People were displaced, they were scattered, loved ones, friends couldn't get a hold of them, mass panic. And early on, we made the mistake of characterizing those individuals as missing people. Shortly after that, I realized that was the wrong term. And the reason for that is because there was a tendency, especially on the part of the national media, to correlate the number of people that were missing or unaccounted for with the number of dead bodies we would find, right? And that would just cause so much angst and panic and trauma. And so we had to change that. But at some point, I think there was one day, there were like some 3,000 people, right, that were unaccounted for, right?
Yeah.
And we had set up this whole mechanism to try to identify or locate them and let them. In many cases, they didn't even know we were looking for them, right? And I think I remember talking with you about that. And I was in my office and we were on the phone and I was telling you about that. And you made a suggestion, well, give me the names and I'll print them. Right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It was just 5 days after the fire. And you had this list, and the first list was only 100 names.
Okay.
And it went up and down from there. But like the first 100, these people are unaccounted for. And if you go to an evacuation shelter, and there'd be bulletin boards, and there would be, unfortunately, people writing more names on the bulletin boards. I don't know where my friend James is.
Right.
I don't know his last name. I saw him running down the road and abandoned his car, and he was running down the road. I think he's in his 70s. And so on the list, it would say James, 70s, Paradise, question mark afterwards. But so much of that was going on. And that first 100, we said, why don't we print the names to help get people off the list? I had coworkers who I didn't even they were unaccounted for. They were on the list for a little while.
Okay.
We couldn't find them. I might even call them and ask them to be put on the list.
Yeah.
But it was like, well, she left. She has family in Eureka. She's okay. And then they would come off the list. So that list went from 100 to 1,000 to 300 to 3,200. And I do remember that at one point, the LA Times writing an article, and the headline was something along the lines of, could 1,000 people really be dead from the Paradise Fire?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that was particularly galling to me because I was working really hard to try to keep people as calm as possible, provide them with the information they needed, be accurate about it. But under the circumstances, it just seemed cruel to me to draw a correlation like that and create a perception in the minds of people who, hadn't been able to contact a friend or family that they must be dead, right?
I'd like to think it was carefully explained, though. And I think the local people
they did
understood
fantastic.
it.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, not only the local media, but like the general public realized this is just unaccounted for people. We want to get them off the list, right?
Exactly.
We want to find them. Let us know if they're okay.
Yeah.
Whereas I think the national media saw this list of 1,000 people and asked the same question as the LA Times. Could 1,000 people be dead?
Well, and then again, let's go back to how the media makes its money now, right? You create a headline that someone's going to click on,
That's
right?
a lot of clicks.
Yeah, exactly right. So
there is
that piece of it as well. But yeah, you made the suggestion, let me print the name. And I hadn't thought about that. And I think I immediately said, yeah. And when I took it back to my staff, they said, Sheriff, you sure you want to do that? I said, yeah, I want to do that. Right. Because, there's a little bit of risk involved there. Right. And as you know, as you said a moment ago, we didn't always have the best information about who the people were. Because you're right. We got my friend James, right? Don't know his last name and that kind of thing. So the list was huge, and it wasn't completely all that easy to deal with given the information that we had.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
It's and then at a month later, I think it was down to 3 people.
Exactly.
So it did its job.
It did its job.
Yeah.
It did its job. And I mean, I know that cost the paper money. I mean, you spent a lot of,
But it's such an easy decision.
I appreciate that.
You're trying to keep people informed. And in fact, it wasn't just our newspaper. It was all of our sister newspapers, from the San Jose Mercury News to the Eureka Times-Standard, like 13, 14 newspapers in Northern California. And that's great, because if somebody took that refuge in Eureka and she sees her name on the list, she can call up the sheriff's office and say, hey, I'm on the list, but I'm okay.
No, it was a fantastic, but that's a pretty amazing thing, right? That all of these local newspapers decided, okay, well, this is what's important, right?
Yeah.
That's what we got back to, right?
Right.
Yeah.
It's keeping people informed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And collaborating in those times when it's important to collaborate and get that. And it did. It worked out really, really well. We were able to clear a lot of those names off the list. And fortunately, the vast, vast majority of those individuals all survived and, were able to ultimately accounted for. And
is there one person on that list still missing?
so I believe we might have one person still listed, but we're not entirely sure that person was actually there, because the way those lists got generated. But yeah, by and large, we've been able to account for all of those individuals. Yeah. It's funny because that topic has come up time and time again in other disasters. And so when the fire in Lahaina, right, transpired, I had an opportunity to speak with the chief of police there, and same problem, all of these unaccounted for individuals. And I said, man, you really need to get with your local newspaper and start, getting that list of names out. There was a reluctance to release the names publicly, but that
Did they do it?
So I don't know if he ended up doing it or not. There is, I don't know if we want to do that now, kind of a response that I get from them.
Yeah.
And for that matter, I told the sheriff of LA County the same thing in the last fire, the fire that they had down there, Eaton Palisades fire.
What about in Texas, the floods in Texas?
So I've not had anybody. I did have an AP reporter contact me and interview me about that, but I don't have no law enforcement or public safety authority in Texas reached out to me, and I don't have any contacts there. And also, it's one of those things where, having been in those situations, hey, Sheriff, some guy from California is calling you to tell you how to do your job. Like,
right.
Probably not going to get through.
But reporters like that AP reporter know that, like, if there's a story about crisis management, it's good to talk to sheriff in Butte County, because he's been through it so many times. Yeah?
I have been interviewed by a number of folks from outside the area with regard to all those kinds of things.
So I have a question, if I could turn the tables on.
Please do.
And I've never asked you this question before, but so now in my current job, I see a lot of like crisis management classes where you can take how to deal as a communications professional in a crisis.
Yeah.
I'm betting that you've never taken a crisis management class.
I have never taken a crisis management class.
Because the reporter friends that were up here after the campfire, there were, many of them, and a lot of them like gravitated to our newsroom, so I'd get a chance to talk to them. And they loved you because you were approachable, you answered all questions, you were honest, you were a regular person, and they weren't accustomed to that in their current job. And I think like that's a big difference in what I see people in crisis. You were calm, and that's your nature. You were a leader, and that's your nature. And I look at some others, and I'm thinking like, why did this person just say that? Other disasters. Do you ever get to that point when you're watching TV and say, why did you say that?
all the time. So I've never taken crisis management class. I would probably fail the class because the things that they seem to teach and that I see other people do, same kind of thing. Why would you say that? Why would you do that? And there are times when I watch, press conferences, and think to myself, my wife will go, stop yelling at the TV. They can't hear you. So, okay, so all right, fine. I won't stop yelling at the TV. But, I think back like that horrible, tragic school shooting in Uvalde, Texas. And that was a failure of leadership from the very beginning. And it just continued all the way up to the highest levels. And when they were talking to the media, it was painful to watch because they were representing law enforcement in such a negative way, but they were doing disservice to the community and to the parents like that. The fact they wouldn't answer questions. They didn't seem to just really appreciate or understand the fact that sometimes you just have to say, this is what happened and it didn't go the way it should have gone, and we're going to find out why, and we were wrong, or whatever the case may be. That goes a long way towards maintaining credibility, as you well know, as opposed to trying to just talk in circles around the whole thing, right?
Yeah. And you saw the same thing with the flooding recently. It's like those accountability questions are going to come up in a press conference a couple days after. Why weren't people warned? And I think there was a lot of that in the campfire too. But
there was,
yeah. But when you see those questions from reporters, is it offensive, or how do you feel when somebody right after the campfire, a reporter after the campfire says, why didn't the alarms work or whatever?
Yeah. So I think it's not like I relish, like, I can't wait for the hard question. I think a part of that is you've got to be confident in your ability to articulate complex issues and complex, circumstances. And also just acknowledge the fact that as much as there is an expectation that we execute perfectly every time, we will never be able to execute perfectly every single time, right? And there is that piece of it. And we've gotten better and better and better, and I think I've been able to articulate the complexity of that better and better as time has gone on. The thing that is interesting to me is that there have been a lot of disasters that have preceded the LA fires and the floods and things like that. And I know that I watch other sheriffs involved in disasters and crisis to see what's going on so that I can go, well, I can learn from that. And I'm wondering why they didn't figure that out either, right? You're gonna get the question about alert and warning. It's going to be one of the primary things, and be ready for it. Just start to explain it, right?
Yeah, the newest thing is you can see reporters, when they ask questions, they'll sometimes get demonized by the person they're asking. Like, how dare you ask that question right now?
Yeah,
get out of it. And that's a journalist's job, is to ask questions.
The hard questions.
Yeah. You shouldn't that's what bothers me more than anything, is question the credibility of the person asking the questions. That's what they're supposed to do.
Yeah. So
and you never did that. You never did that.
I appreciate it. There were times when I would get testy with reporters. I think the more tired I got, especially when they asked me the same question over and over and over again, I would sometimes I would snap back a little bit. But also, I think that that added to the fact that, hey, I'm a human being too, right? I'm not a robot up here, and sometimes you're going to get a little bit of the unvarnished, response.
Yeah. And at those places, like in the flooding, for example, you have like people higher than the sheriff answering questions, and like the governor should not be there answering questions at the daily press conference, because the governor's going to give a political statement, right?
100%.
Yeah. Whereas you're going to give a tactical answer to a question.
And that's the other thing that drives me crazy about all these. And you have, these major disasters, inevitably you have politicians descend upon it just so they can say, I'm here. I'm doing something for you. And they all want to get their little, segment on the news. One of my big pet peeves, my staff knows this, is this human backdrop that gets created at these events. And I learned my lesson in the spillway not to become a part of a human backdrop. There's this tendency to get all of these elected officials or politicians or government, executives to stand behind one another while one person is, speaking. I guess it's to suggest that, hey, we're all here together, and our presence lends credibility to this person's statement. One of the things that I found is that I don't always agree with the things that people are saying. So, and my facial expressions will often betray me. Like if I don't agree with them, I'll go, "That's stupid. I don't know why are we saying that?" Right. So I learned to stand off camera so that I
noticed that.
Yeah, exactly right. I'll tell you a funny story most recent with those LA fires, but same kind of thing. I don't agree with that. And the other thing is I find these politicians, they want to get up and they don't add value to the commentary. They just want to say I was here, right? And we're doing everything we can for you, and all that, because it doesn't provide any value. So I think leaving them off to the side. I'm sure you probably saw some of the coverage of the LA fire, and I know the sheriff there, and I actually know the chief of police. He was a sheriff. He and I became sheriffs at the same time. He was sheriff of LA County. I was sheriff of Butte County at the same time. We went to new sheriff's training together, so I got to know Jim McDonald a little bit. Very competent guy. But when you saw I don't know if you recall the interaction play out between the fire chief and the mayor, right? It was a train wreck that occurred.
It was
on national TV. In real time, right?
Yeah.
And that's another example of don't create these human backdrops. Don't put politicians up there who are just going to say things to advance their political cause. And man, if you don't agree, you better figure that out before you get up on in front of everybody, because that's going to go really, really bad. And it undermined the credibility of the entire response, right?
Yeah. If I remember right, when the president and the governor showed up, thank goodness it was only like a couple hours.
Right.
But yeah, that was one of those instances. I remember you staying way off to the side, and not being a part of the photo op.
Yeah. That was another thing. And you have to, as a law enforcement, as a sheriff in those circumstances, you have to contend with the political aspect of things. That's part of the thing. And the fact is, you talk about the campfire, Donald Trump, who in his first term came, as well as Jerry Brown, who was governor, and then Gavin Newsom, who was governor-elect, right? So you had 3 of these people showing up in your community. And one of the things that I took from that, the rule that I kind of have for myself is I don't generally entertain politicians or elected officials during these crises to advance their political cause, but I will engage with them to ensure that they understand that they're going to need to bring resources to our community, right? Mm-hmm. And so, in that regard, absolutely had an opportunity to speak with Donald Trump and explain to him why it was important that they support the effort to, FEMA and all those efforts, and same with Gavin Newsom and with Jerry Brown. But it was very interesting to see all of them interact with each other. You could definitely see the tension. I think the tension would be significantly greater now. If it happened again, God forbid, I don't want it to happen again, I might show up with a bucket of popcorn just to watch the fireworks, right?
Yeah, I think the LA sheriff got a little taste of that down there.
Absolutely. Not the fires, but not only that, and now they're dealing with the whole immigration thing and ICE, and the fact that federal authorities aren't communicating with local authorities, and the problems that plays out. And that's where you get into this whole when politics begins to interfere with public safety, it makes the job of sheriff, local sheriff, really, really challenging. Yeah.
Interesting story about that. There was one press conference where Jerry Brown at Daily Briefing, he was there. I think at just one, right?
I think
after
so.
the
Correct.
campfire?
Yeah.
So, talk about relationships and relationship building. There was a woman named Janet Upton. You know
Yeah, oh,
Janet.
yeah,
She
yeah.
worked for the CDF.
Yeah.
And I think she was helping out with communications during that fire. Well, at the press conference, we had a younger reporter there, and she just got overrun by the national media. She couldn't get a question in, right? And she come back to the office and says, I didn't even get to ask a question. And 5 minutes later, she gets a phone call on her cell phone from Jerry Brown.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was because Janet said, you should call her
Yeah.
because she didn't get a chance. And he calls from the Black Explorer or whatever, driving back to Sacramento. And it's like the same type of thing we saw with you in the local media. He took care of, because at Janet's insistence, I'm sure.
Yeah.
He didn't know who the Enterprise-Record was.
Yeah.
But that's what it comes back to. It's just like great one-on-one relationships. And thank goodness for Janet, because we were able to get some questions answered.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And our questions, as you know, the local people's questions are so much different from the national reporters' questions. Yeah.
But they're the questions that matter to the people who are impacted by the event the most.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah.
And that's the piece that gets lost.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I got to know Jerry Brown a little bit as sheriff, and he called me during the spillway incident, and same kind of thing, and hey, what's going on? And I had interaction with him during the campfire, and same kind of thing. I actually had his cell phone; he had mine. We could communicate if I needed something. We could talk. That's not been my experience with Gavin Newsom. It doesn't have the same level of willing to engage. I've had a couple of meetings with him, but Jerry Brown was good about that whole thing. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think that that whole interaction during the campfire was a really amazing part of a huge tragedy, right? And I appreciated the fact that we could come together and really help get the story out. And for that matter, your crew received some incredible acknowledgement, some awards for that, right? And the reporting awards.
Yeah, it was so gratifying. I mean, it came months later, but we were named a Pulitzer Prize finalist for breaking news reporting, one of 3 in the country. And the interesting part about that is, like, there's no categories based on staff size or anything.
Okay.
We're competing with the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and the LA Times for any breaking news story anywhere in the country that year.
Right.
In fact, the paper that won it was the synagogue shootings outside of Pittsburgh.
Oh, okay.
Another big event.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the reason we were a finalist is because of the way we kept the public informed, and we did that, of course, with a ton of help from local officials like yourself, like Mike Ramsey, but just the way we kept people informed, I think, was impressive to the Pulitzer judges. So yeah, that was a great way to go out.
That's fantastic and well deserved. Absolutely well deserved. I was proud of my local newspaper. That was a fantastic thing, right?
Yeah. It was really bittersweet for me personally, because you were one of the few people I told a month before the fire that I was leaving the industry at the end of the year, and it was just so hard. 40 years of my life devoted to newspapers, and I loved it, absolutely loved it. But knowing that I was leaving at the same time as producing all this great stuff, it didn't really want to make me hang around, but it made me proud that it was a good way to go out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you left the newspaper industry and found yourself at the North Valley Community Foundation, right?
Yeah.
Which another amazing organization that has done a lot to help our community and surrounding communities, deal with major disasters and the trauma that was visited upon them and all those kinds of things. Really, really incredible work. But there's an aspect of that is kind of near and dear to my heart. And one of the things that I recognized after the campfire was that there was a significant amount of trauma visited upon every member of our community, including our first responders, right?
Sure.
Fire, law enforcement, EMS. And I saw where not only, many of their members lost their own homes, but just the impact of that thing, I was concerned was going to result in, you know, physical as well as mental trauma that we were going to have to contend with. And I was worried what that would play. And so I was looking for a way to try to provide some resources or address that whole thing. And I looked out and I found an app, a cell phone app that was for first responders to help them, access mental health or, resources or, deal with physical well-being, things like that. And I think it cost around $50,000. And so I remember putting an application in. I think I contacted you and I was so excited. I was like, okay, I'm gonna ask for $50,000. And what I remember is you essentially calling me back and saying, you need to go bigger, right? You need to go bigger. And I couldn't at that moment wrap my head around what was bigger, right? And we kept talking, and the fact that you pushed that and helped me kind of see a bigger vision is really incredible, because it turned into an amazing program, right? So when I call you with this idea for 50,000 and you say it needs to go bigger, what prompted you to say that?
Well, the foundation raised a little bit more than $70 million in the days after the fire, and we spent it on everything from housing to education to youth and family programs. But a big component of it was health and wellness, because the community was in crisis. And we did things like free counseling lessons, just anything that would help people. But first responders have a different set of issues. You just can't say, we'll give you free counseling sessions.
Right.
They have to go to the right counselor
Right.
who can approach things in the right way. And you came up with this idea of first responder focused for the sheriff's office. And when I said go bigger, it was more like, let's do all first responders in the county, because everybody's traumatized by this. And let's come up with a program just for them. It was like one of the easiest things to say yes to.
That's amazing.
That we did in 7 years, and we're still doing grants.
Yeah.
But it was one of the easiest things we've ever said yes to, because it was so needed. You didn't have the money in your budget. Every fire department or police department didn't have money in their budget for that. It's a shame that the policymakers, the budget, people who approve budgets think of that as a frill.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yep.
It's really important, but that's where we step in. Is we step in when government won't do it, insurance won't cover it, PG&E lawsuit settlement won't cover it. So that's the perfect place for philanthropy to say we can help.
Yeah. Well, it was amazing, and because we've given you updates on there, but we were ultimately awarded over $1 million to put together a wellness program for all first responders in Butte County, law enforcement, fire, EMS, all the agencies. And as a result of that, we have been able to we have programs to provide mental health services, physical well-being. We're able to reach into the family dynamic and help with family situations. And the program is still running today. We're still finding ways to keep the program going. And I honestly believe that it has, I'm sure it's saved lives. Regrettably, suicide is a factor within, public service, and I'm sure it saved lives. It saved careers, and it's really helped us, I think, deal with that tragedy, process it, and then be prepared to deal with all of the tragedies that have followed, right? Because the campfire wasn't the last thing that we had to deal with, right? I mean, it's one thing after another. And I think it's built resiliency into our public safety community. And so, man, I appreciate the fact that you didn't just say yes right off the bat. You said go bigger, and then you said yes.
Yeah. That's great. Thank you. That's good to hear. I mean, I think the hardest part for everybody in these agencies is just to be able to say they are feeling something, that they have a problem, that they need help.
Yep.
And I think if nothing else, just the fact that they can now feel comfortable coming to somebody and say, I'm not feeling 100% in my mental health. That's a win right there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important to destigmatize that. And evolve and get better at dealing with it. So that's been an incredible thing, and it's one of the aspects of my tenure as sheriff that I will be proud of. And when the day comes when I'm no longer sheriff, I can look back and say that was something that was I was happy to be part of.
Yeah, and us too. It was just such a perfect idea.
Yeah,
especially when it got bigger.
Absolutely. Well, I think we're coming to a close, but in order to restore order to the universe and make sure that you're feeling good, do you have any other questions of me?
Oh, I got some good ones in,
okay.
Didn't I?
You did?
Yeah. I don't.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
See, as
hard to believe.
That's okay. And as someone who's been interviewed a lot, when they say no more questions, you
Run.
take it and you run. Exactly right. You call it good. Well, my friend, I really appreciate you taking the time to come in and talk to me. And I think this all started with you shot me an email and said, "Hey, you want to get coffee?" And I said, "I do, but what about this?" And you were so gracious to jump on it. I know that this is a little unorthodox, but I really do think people will enjoy hearing about this collaboration and some of the things that we've been through. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. It was very enjoyable, and I hope we get to do it again.
Absolutely. Maybe next time we will do it over a beer or coffee or something like that.
I love that idea. The beer is a brilliant idea.
Okay, I think we
on camera, around the table.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Maybe we'll sample some local breweries, something along those lines. Exactly right. All right. Well, to our listeners, thanks for checking this episode out. I hope you found it informative and enjoyable. If you did, I'd ask that you like it and share it. Let people know about it. If you want to provide some feedback, that'd be fantastic too. If you have a topic that you would like me to explore or a guest that you might like me to have on the show, by all means, you can do that. You can email us at sheriffsmike@buttecounty.net. And until next time, stay safe, stay informed, and as always, you're cleared to talk.